And you may need to approve that. I'm not sure. All right.
Yeah,
Ladies
I
and
said
gentlemen, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am having way too much fun off air. Way too much fun off air talking with my guest, Sharon Cameron. And I'm just delighted to have you. I'm so taken by your book, by Artifice, so taken by it. And to find you with this wonderful, bubbly, can I say, just expressive, just lovely personality, just makes it so much, so much, so wonderful.
I think it's a
Shut
little
me
bit
out, somebody,
surprising.
please.
I think it's a little bit surprising to people sometimes when they actually meet me because I write about very dark
Oh,
things.
yeah.
I'm writing about the Holocaust, and then, I'm like, "Hi, how are you?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's sometimes, but these two things do actually live side by side inside me. So
And I find that wonderful, by the way. I absolutely, I hate to say as opposed to, but if you were saddened by your research and impacted, and I would understand that also. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're delightful. Okay.
Thank you. But don't we all have a choice about that? Don't we all have a choice, right? To
Yes.
decide which part of the world we are going to focus on. And I think that's a lot of what my books are about, actually. So
So let's talk about that. If I were to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, go for it.
yeah. I'm a Nashville, Tennessee native. I live on the same street I grew up on, so I didn't get very far. And so I've always kind of been in this little bubble of my family. For many, many years, I was a musician and I love music, and I thought that's what I was gonna do for the rest of my life. But I've always been an enormous reader. I've always been absolutely fascinated, even as a child, by the idea of our past and how the past lays those stones into the future, and all of these experiences, the human experiences that have been lost because they've died in people's memories. And I think that for me, that has informed an enormous part of my drive now to reach back and rescue what it feels like a rescue, like I'm rescuing these stories and bringing them back to the present, and bringing them back into our now, not only so they won't be forgotten, but because we can be challenged by them. um, that's something I believe in so much, and maybe that's a great introduction to me.
That's a beautiful, and Cameron, that's a beautiful introduction. It makes sense. And I know this is always a weird question because if somebody asked it to me, I would, but where do you think that comes from in you?
The whole idea
Of,
of the past
of the
and what we
past and bringing it, yeah, that,
yeah
that, that desire, need, whatever, drive.
I think it is because maybe I'm a frustrated anthropologist at heart. Maybe I really shouldn't have been a writer or a
Oh, no,
musician.
you should be a
Maybe I
writer,
should have been an
exclusively
anthropologist.
a writer. Would you
Yeah,
agree? Yeah.
I think it's because it feels so sad to me to think of these people, and I focus particularly on people who have chosen to make a stand, people who have chosen to look at the terrible things that were happening around them, and to do something about it. And that choice to me is something that when I find that, and I see this depth of experience and I see this choice, I feel incredibly challenged by that. I feel challenged to not only think about what they chose in their circumstance, but what am I going to choose in my circumstance right now today? And so I think it's that personal challenge to me that makes me want to reach back, pull these stories forward, put them out there, and let the world be challenged. What are we going to do about it? How do we choose humanity over hate right now in this world at this moment? That's what I care about.
And so one could say always, but now more than ever.
Yes.
I shouldn't say now more than ever because someone will say, well, but this and that. Yeah,
Yes.
it's more, it's and I'm not going to get into politics or anything with you about it. Yet
No.
the social media stuff, I just the misinformation, the disinformation, the out and out lie, and people gravitating to
Mm.
whatever they choose to believe and not. I get obsessed about it. Again, I'm a very, very
Yeah.
man. I get obsessed. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that, the hate that created the Holocaust has so many forms, and it is alive. It is well in the world today in many different ways, in big ways, little ways, in genocides, in misinformation, in political division, in all the ways. And this is an ongoing struggle, and it will be an ongoing struggle always through time, because we're people and we're imperfect and we mess it up every time. And so this is the ongoing struggle that I think always will be. So when I find these stories and I put them out there, I honestly want them to be timeless. My greatest wish would be for these stories to be timeless, and to be the challenge, and to be a focal point for people trying to choose in the future as well. That would be my greatest wish.
That's incredible. That's beautiful. Sharon Cameron, thank you for that. Do you, again, you're very young. The original Twilight Zones.
Yes.
You've heard of them, right? I mean,
I've watched them. Yes.
have you? There was one that, well, I had people from our librarian once, and the one lady said, everybody says there's a Seinfeld episode for that. Louis says there's a Twilight Zone episode for that. And when you're saying that, it reminds me of one of my favorite, most just difficult but important Twilight Zones. It's I Am Night, Color Me Black. And there's a line in it that and I may misquote, why it was getting dark. Let me get to it. It was getting dark during the daytime, and darker. And one preacher says, you know what the darkness is? He says it's the hate. He said, we've got so much hate inside that we're vomiting out. And that I get chills thinking about that. That's why it was getting darker and darker. And I just, I agree with you. And just trying to, what do I say? Find solutions to it when people are choosing to.
And, I think for me, those solutions really come down to the individual choice. And that's why I try to focus on these people who have chosen, and who have made a stand. And I think a lot of our world feeds this idea that we are, as individuals, we are insignificant, and that our choices don't matter, and that our daily choices don't matter. And I'm here to say that history teaches us and shows us the reality that it does, that these small choices that we make every day, that's what matters. And when we are choosing individually every day, that's what changes the world. It'll be the choices of the people on a one-on-one basis, not necessarily what a government does here and a government does there.
I love that. And I've just got to mention a couple of things from, and again, the website, SharonCameronBooks.com, up to social media, etc. I love the quote, but why is it sunny? I don't want it to be sunny. Nothing exciting ever happens when it's sunny. Tell me about that. I love that. I love that.
That is such a true quote. And my mother laughed at me for years for saying that. And when
excuse me, you were 4 years old.
I was 4, sitting in the car, and I can actually remember that day being disappointed that the sun was shining so brightly, because it felt so exciting to me if it was about to storm. So the whole dark and stormy night trope was alive and well in me, at the age of 4. It probably says quite a bit about me. But when I told my husband that story, or I think my mother actually told him that story about me, he was like, oh yeah, nothing's changed. Exactly the same.
I love that.
And it's so true. Like I do love, I said all these very inspirational things, but I do love story, and I love immersive story, and I love these stories that have atmosphere and let me feel this incredible anticipation, and an incredible world surrounding me. And that goes exactly beside the themes that I want to bring out in my work, is I really want a reader to immerse, and I think that's what I like to do when I read.
Yeah, well, you do a beautiful job with Artifice. And how many books? I'm looking at all your books on your website.
Yeah,
You,
this is number 8. This is my 8th novel, which is hard to believe.
yeah.
But yeah, number 8.
And I keep saying I want to get into it, but there's so much about you that I find absolutely fascinating. When I read that quote and I saw that it was you at 4 years old, I read it. Am I reading that? Wow. I mean, that just blew me. Seriously, that I had to like contemplate it a minute and think, that's what I'm, especially these days. Am I reading this right? Am I getting this right? Is this actually what,
The
and
imagination was well developed.
it's great. And
Yeah,
by the way, you like rain and storms and
I do. I
so
love gloom. Gloom
when
is
I
lovely.
when I found the word pluviophile years ago, somebody that likes the sound of rain or being in the rain, or
Ah,
it was
that's
like, oh my God, that's me. I got
great.
there's a name
No
for
wonder we
it.
get along so well.
I'm a Yeah, I believe me, I love to run out. If it starts raining, uh,
Mhm.
I love to barefoot run out, make sure my jammy bottoms are on and run out in the front yard and just kind of
Absolutely.
bask in it. It's great.
I
It's
love
great.
to listen to it on the
Oh
roof. It's a
yeah,
beautiful
on the
sound.
roof and on the window. Yeah, I'm pluviophile. I found the word. I'm sorry. Sharon Cameron is my guest artist. Got to tell me the background, because when you say about bringing things to light,
Yes.
I had never heard anything like this. And again, it's a novel just
Yes.
released what, days ago? Week? Last week. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
7. And
Yes.
when tell me how you came upon it
Yeah.
and why you decided to do it.
Well, so I had been, I'd done a couple of books about World War II. And, when you're researching things in depth, one thing leads to another. I was looking at rescuers, and I came across the story of a man. His name was Johann van Hulst. And he was one of these people that I'm talking about. He was a person who made a choice, and he was a very unassuming, quiet man who happened to be living or working, I should say, in a teaching college, teaching teachers. And this college happened to be located next to a former kindergarten. And the former kindergarten during the Nazi occupation of Amsterdam was being used as a prison for Jewish toddlers and babies. And that's horrifying. And for Johann van Hulst, it was unacceptable. He decided to begin a baby smuggling ring. And so he and 2 others, they were rescuing these children. They were erasing names from the lists, retyping the list, putting babies in laundry baskets and shopping sacks, and handing them out of the windows and over the hedges, spiriting them out of the city. And they are credited, this baby smuggling ring, they're credited with saving at least 600 Jewish babies and toddlers during the war, which is an incredible thing to have to do. And it's something he never even talked about until later in his life. It was just his choice to choose life over death. And so I was looking at this story of this man, and what a hero he was, really just an amazing hero. And I was comparing it with another man who was about the same age, who grew up in Amsterdam, who was there through the Nazi occupation. And this was a man named Han van Meegeren, and he was one of the most clever and notorious art forgers of the 20th century. And he was really talented, except that he was also very bitter, I think, about a lot of bad reviews that he got. So he came up with this way of making what I could only call plastic paint. And this plastic paint could crack and look like a 400-year-old painting. And he was fooling everyone. He was selling to collectors, to museums. And then when the Nazis took over Amsterdam, he just went right on doing what he was doing and sold fakes to the Nazis. So a von Meegeren forged Vermeer was hanging in Hermann Göring, the second in command of the Reich, hanging in his office over his desk as the jewel of his art collection. And von Meegeren, he made $23 million selling fakes during the war. What would now be that amount? And he lived it up while the rest of the country was starving. And these 2 men, it was so interesting to me to think about these two men who grew up in the same place, who actually look quite a bit alike. If you look at their pictures, I think they look alike, but you couldn't find two people who use their talents more differently. And I
It's
thought,
interesting.
wow, what if Johann von Hulst, the rescuer of Jewish toddlers and babies, what if he had had Han von Meegren's 23 million?
Dollars, yeah.
Would the world be a different place? I think it actually would be. And from there birthed my story, Artifice.
So the research had to be incredible for you. But you got to tell me about the research.
Yeah, the research was, well, for me, is a lot of fun. Okay, so the research is a huge joy for me. I love it. I love every aspect about it. Being in an archives is my happy place. It is just so
Okay.
much fun to me. Um,
Excuse me, I have a friend whose son is an archivist in New York. So being in an archive is your happy place.
yeah. We've probably met then, because I've spent a lot of time in an archives in New York too. But I love that aspect of things. And so, of course, I scheduled this trip to go to Amsterdam to really get to know these neighborhoods that I wanted to write about. To go to von Meegren's house, and to go see all these places, to see the kindergarten where the children were held and where other Jewish people were held and deported from. I wanted to do all these things, and I was getting ready to go on my trip, and I was meeting with some Holocaust survivors, and they said, well, we know this man who is a Dutch immigrant. He was a teenager during the Nazi occupation of Amsterdam. I was like, oh, I'd love to meet him. So they set up a meeting, and I went 15 minutes from my house and sat down and met with him. He's an incredibly interesting guy. And I told him what I was working on, and he said, oh, well, you know that Han van Meegeren, my father was his accountant. And it's, no, I didn't know that at all. And so he said, yeah, I met von Meegeren many times, as a young man. And he was able to tell me about his art studio and what he was like, what his personality was like, his mistress. He was able to tell me about the paintings that were hanging on the wall of his house. And I thought, wow, I was going across the sea. Right. I was crossing an ocean to find out all this great information. And it was actually 15 minutes down the road, from my house, so I think sometimes you put stuff out into the world, and you just don't know what you're going to get to grab back out. And isn't that the beauty
It's a
of
beauty.
digging into these stories, right?
And you got to be obviously very open to it. I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
believe in that aspect of it. If you're open to something, and you were, and curious, and what a difference from some of the fantasies that you've written. I don't know how you do that, but you've done it.
Well,
And
it's interesting. Like, a lot of people ask me about the change in genre, because my earlier books, my first five, I'd done some steampunk things and dystopian, a little light sci-fi, like a lot of speculative. I'd done a lot of different things because I just love a good story, and I love the meaning that I can pull from story. But all of those stories, even if they were futuristic, I researched those books exactly like I was researching a
it's interesting.
historical, because I find that, again, when you pull from these layers of real human experience, and you use that, even if you're applying them to a different kind of setting, or a fantasy setting, or a futuristic setting, when you pull from real human experience, then that story just, it has that ring of truth to it, and when you lay down those layers of foundation, I find that the stories are so much more real, even if I'm applying that to a different situation or setting. And so, again, I think researching like a historical is what has made my earlier books feel so believable. So to me, writing a historical just felt like an absolute natural extension, to everything that I'd already been doing and writing, and really, honestly, the kind of books of my heart, because I've spent my early years reading so many of them. So very natural to me, surprising maybe, to the rest of the world. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Sharon
Yeah.
Cameron is my guest. Sharon Cameron Books.com. The new book, artifice. I keep saying I want to get into it more, but I really appreciate giving some of the talking a little bit about the research. I've got to say that maybe I read differently if I'm reading for an interview than I do. And I learned years ago that the dedication may or may not. Sometimes it's to an initial or two, and the author would rather not say who that is, and that's cool. Sometimes they're more in depth. But I just love what you wrote for the creators of beauty and those who rebuild it.
Yes.
That just blew me away. And again, that's another one that I don't want to say these days more, but I needed to calm it a little bit and read again and again. Do you mind telling us a little? I hope that's not too much of a weird question.
No, not at all, because I think it's really interesting, or maybe this is just something interesting that I have found about myself as an author, is I find that I don't often really know what my book is about until I've finished it. And so I have
Wow.
these plans, but then and I have these things that I want to bring out, and these choices, that I'm focusing on. But when I get to the end of the book, I realize, oh wow, I think that's really what I was trying to say. And
Huh.
for my last three, World War II, for The Light in Hidden Places, that was really all about the courage of choice and the courage of sacrifice and that humanity over hate, like I was talking about. With Bluebird, it was seeking justice and the power of self-transformation, which is something that I really believe in. And for this book, I looked back at it and I realized that I think what this book is really about at the end of the day is choosing to preserve what is beautiful in our own world, um, choosing beauty, even when we are surrounded by so much ugliness in the world around us. We have the power to choose to surround ourselves with beauty, to choose what is beautiful, choose to build it and create it and rebuild it when it gets torn down. And I think these choices of bravery, of sacrifice, of love over hate, of self-transformation and justice, of choosing beauty. I look back at these last three books and I really do think they represent my hope for the world, because I think these choices, they're life changers. I think they're world changers. Um, and I hope that's what I'm putting into the world. But the cool thing about a book, right, is that everyone is going to find something different, and something different that they pull from these stories. And that's the way it ought to be. That's what literature should do. But what I hope part of what they find is to challenge themselves to choose these things, because I think on the individual basis, these choices are the cornerstones, and they are what's going to change everything. I really believe that.
That's so beautiful. That is so beautiful. It's so powerful. And I agree with you. And to do that, and I love how you said you're not sure. I'm not quoting, but
Yeah.
until you're done, what I don't want to say what you said it much more eloquently than
Well,
I.
yeah,
I
you
love that you know what
discover.
it is when you're done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the discovery of a story takes on a life of its own, right? Even for its creator. And I think that's such a strange and yet lovely truth. And then I look at my own stories and I pull out maybe what I needed. Maybe it's what I needed at that moment. But isn't that the power of story? And isn't that why we ought to be creating it?
Yeah. So many beautiful quotes from you. I'm gonna have to go back through the audio and pull some of them. And I've got to read this so I don't get past it. Thou shalt not be passive only, but shalt turn thy soul to the permanent risk of life. Commandment 7 from the Dutch 10 Commandments to foil the Nazis.
Yes, isn't that is so interesting? One of the things that I had noticed when I have been researching this time, of the war, is how many things in the war got put into the context of the Ten Commandments, which is, it's just so interesting. I mean, I found all kinds of the Ten Commandments of what you're supposed to do when your boat is hit by a torpedo. There were the 10 commandments of for German parachutists. You know, everybody had a 10 commandments.
Ten Commandments.
And then I came across the Dutch 10 commandments to foil the Nazis. And these were part of the tenets of the Dutch resistance. And I thought, I have to use these. And then of course there was you know, a beautiful poem that was basically the 10 commandments of the artist and about creating beauty. And so I interspersed these throughout the book.
And you start with, and again, I also love that line, every eye follows when you walk like you have something to hide. I was just, it's so many, you know, I've got so many pages turned down. I do want to also mention the other thing that told me a lot about you. You can look at the author's notes, but the acknowledgments, when you see things like that, I think it speaks so highly of the person that you are. You just start, I just want to read the one line. With the following, please accept all my love and thanks.
Yeah.
To me, again, to me, that, you know, I'm a voracious reader and have interviewed a lot of authors over the years. This is not going to sound, told me who you are, told me a lot about you. Attitude of gratitude, not to quote a SpongeBob song, but that attitude of gratitude. It was beautiful.
I think that these things, these books and these stories and the research, they do not take shape in isolation. I owe so much to so many people, and not only the people that are here with me now, but the people that came before and that lived these lives that I am trying to challenge others with today. You know, I wrote a story about it, but they lived it. And, you know, so I think that I owe a lot. I owe a lot to my family, who is very patient with my creative process. I owe a lot to an incredible supportive team that I've got through my publisher and my editor. And I could not do what I do without all of these people that I am surrounded with. So yeah, this is a group effort, and I think a group effort of the universe, even maybe, you know, to bring these things to fruition.
Again, I'm continue to be more blown away by you. Seriously, when you explain some of this and give us some of the background for it. I'm talking with Sharon Cameron. Again, the book Artifice, available everywhere online. I always like to say, please try to buy it as close to home as possible. IndieBound has it. Even the chains, I've come to realize with so many independent bookstores gone in communities, even the chains in your community, Barnes & Noble, they're renting or buying space. They're employing local people. They're helping the economy. And so when you can't,
I'm from a brick and mortar.
Yeah. There you go. Brick and mortar. Much better set. And you can IndieBound if also, whatever. You can find it everywhere. And those that I remember when Amazon during the pandemic, and I had never ordered on Amazon and never thought, I don't know, my concept of Amazon, never thought I'd see those trucks in my neighborhood. I just thought they were a little, you know, different.
Right.
I remember I had a caller that had the book the day after I did the interview with the author, and things were shut down. I mean, I said, so, well, I ordered it after the interview. I said, you've got it? I still don't know how they're mind readers or whatever. I still don't know how that's out, but wherever you buy the book, read the book, talk about the book, and gift the book, part of it. Knowing that you're bringing these out, and kind of touched on it before, knowing that you're bringing these out and putting these stories in the world that are just incredible for people. Again, me with my background, why didn't I know this? Of course, you can't know everything. It was so fascinating how you weave the book, how you take the facts, historical facts, and weave it into a mystery that's just, it draws you in, and I dare say won't let you go. It's like, oh, I should probably try to go to sleep. Yeah, let me read a little more.
I love being the cause of lost sleep. There is no bigger compliment than to be the cause of someone's lost night's rest.
You do it. Let me ask you, I hate to ask you on air, are you good for another tenor?
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Okay.
Go
Okay.
right on. Yeah, we're
Because I'm
good.
having a blast with you. Ladies and
Good.
gentlemen, listen to the Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland, copyright B. Free Radio Limited 2023, produced by Love and Miss Money Face in cooperation with White Rabbit Productions. The Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland, is an adult-oriented show intended for and only for a mature adult audience. Listener discretion is strongly advised, of course. If you don't like me, turn me off, please. I still don't get some of the disclaimers. It's like, but okay, done. And I am having the pleasure and honor of talking with the author of the just last week released book, Artifice, Sharon Cameron, and Sharon Cameron Books.com, of course, social media, etc. I know the book has only been out a week. What kind
Yes.
of response are you getting?
I'm
From what I read is great, but
Yeah, so far really really good. I think one of the things that I love about the lane that I write in is that there's a very wide there's a very wide range in my audience. So I can reach down to kids, to eighth graders. I can reach all the way up to, people in their 90s. And I hear from I hear multi-generational people that read these books. And it is so cool to be able to, I think, write in this space where I can reach such a wide range of people. So,
yes,
so the comments I get are so varied. I find kids will come to me and say, I've been in schools this week, and I've been in bookstores this week, and all of these different places. And kids will come and say, I love to understand about World War II. I love to
really.
understand about, yeah. And it's there's a real fascination I think, with the war. And I think it has a lot to do with how clear cut the line was between so-called good and evil. In the war, it was very clear cut, and it's a fascinating time, I think, for them to read about. But then, of course, they also respond to the mystery and to heists and to who is good and who is bad, and then I speak with other, more mature people, and they're
You
talking
mean
to
old people like me? Old and
well, I don't know what
mature.
you're talking about. I don't even know what you mean by that statement. I don't understand. But I talk
Yeah,
with
right.
other people of different ranges and different periods of their life, and what they pull is again the rescue of children, the art, and the love of art, and like, wow, I want to go to my art museum, and relook at some of these things and look at them with a new eye, and all of that is such a pleasure to me.
It's kind of make you feel when you know you're inspiring people, knowing inspiring people to learn history, to understand, to connect them, and the art
Mhm.
aspect
Oh yeah.
right about, and knowing that make to inspire someone to go to an art museum or research art or look at art or history, not having a clue of what that inspiration might, what that person might, whether they do something publicly or not, but where that might lead them. That's got to be
It,
very, if you don't mind if I say,
it,
soul satisfying.
I think I think it is. I think it is for me. Because I believe I'm a huge believer in passion, and I think passion and these things that come from such a deep place inside us, and that mean, I mean, it's different for everybody, right? Everybody has these things, that they have caught. I mean, it might be art or music, it might be a business plan, it could be anything. But when people like find that passion inside themselves, and you engage it and you put it in the world, what I have learned from writing, and I never really understood this, I think, until I became a writer as much. Maybe I understood it a little bit as a musician, but for me it was for being a writer, that when you really engage that and you put it out on the page, it's like this mystical magical process that I cannot explain with science, where it goes out the other side into the world, and people catch that thing and they make it their own, and they engage it and they put it out into the world, and somebody else catches it, and I realized that it's like this mystical process that's been going on since the beginning of time. And as a kid, I read all these books and I found all these things that were so interesting and meant so much to me, and all I've been doing is like reaching out and catching that passion from somebody else that came before. And I think it's a magical
Very
process, and
generous of
it
you.
feels like such a privilege, you know, to participate in something like that. I mean, I don't take it lightly. But I hope that what I'm doing is making somebody else do the same thing. That's what I hope.
Well, when you I'm being complimentary, not argumentative, but it's obvious that you do when you have younger people and not so young people tell you that. I mean, the idea of inspiration for someone, what to look into history more, to look at the war, to go to an art museum, to want to read more about that. You're doing it.
I
They're
hope
telling you.
so.
People are, well, again, I not being argumentative. They're telling you they're doing it's happening. And those are the people that come to you and tell you. The countless that you inspire, the countless that will make people want to learn more about what was going on. I mean, even again in your in the notes, I believe you talk about drug use during the war. You talk about was it the cafe? Yeah, the cafe. I'm not going to try to pronounce all the.
A doctor, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I worked with a guy many years ago, and his line was, "If you ain't Dutch, you ain't much." That was, I kept thinking
Like
about
that.
yeah. But to say those things and to inspire people to want to, like you said about the drug use or just different things that people would have no idea of if you weren't writing it, and writing it in such an intriguing way. You know, I out myself about this a lot. When I was kind of a fluke in radio. I'm not going to get into law. It was just like somebody said, you ought to do a radio show on a radio station. 2 weeks later, I was doing like the worst in the world, didn't know anything about it. Bottom line is, when I would read, I didn't know there were publicists out there, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I started to develop relationships because I was doing a lot of authors, nonfiction, and someone pitched a novel to me once. And this sounds, when I say this, it sounds terrible, but I was thinking, okay, so what do I ask them? Tell me about the story you made up. And I should be too humiliated to even out myself and say it. I had no idea, because I read some novels when I was younger. I remember reading Bram Stoker's Dracula. I remember reading a couple of other novels that stuck with me.
Mhm.
Yet I'm going to interview someone. Well, I started to read and I started to learn. And I'm thinking, and I love nonfiction. I love nonfiction. Yet
Yeah.
a novelist is creating worlds.
Mhm.
I'm not juxtaposing them. I'm not saying this
Yeah.
is, but
Yeah.
I've learned that over the years. People like yourself, you're creating worlds,
Yeah. And
which blows my mind.
I think that, you know, my goal in that creation, of course, in historical fiction, I'm trying to recreate a world. You know, I'm trying to recreate something that
Yeah.
was, and I'm trying to have it be very reflective of the truth, you know, of people's situation, because again, people lived these things. But I've also made up worlds, you know, from whole cloth too. But I
Sure.
think that the reason that novels, that story is powerful. And I don't want to say more powerful than nonfiction, because I also love nonfiction and read it. In fact, you're in my wall of nonfiction right now. You know,
Yeah.
I read it all. I read it
Beautiful.
all the time. But I think that we learn facts. You know, we learn facts in school. We read stuff. We learn facts. Eventually, facts tend to fade. You know, they go out of our mind.
Yeah.
You know, and our brains are just built that way. You know, at some point we jettison. You know, there's too much in there and we
Yeah.
jettison. But when you feel something, you know, when you feel that person's story, when you have walked in their shoes for this little window of time, with the time that you put into reading this book, when you have felt what they felt, when you felt their pain and their joy, something in there that stays, that doesn't go away. And that feeling, you don't forget the feeling. And that, to me, that's why
Yeah, the
story
feeling.
is so powerful, because it stays with you. Something in a good story that speaks to you, it sinks down in and it stays, and it really does forever become a part of you. And that's why I feel a lot of privilege to do something like that, or to participate in something like that. But I also feel a lot of responsibility in what I am putting out there, to become part of people. And, that's why I think I hearken back to the beginning of our first conversation, that, I hope that what people are pulling out of these stories is the depths, the understanding of the depths that we are capable of as a human race, but at the same time, the juxtaposition of the heights that we can reach to, and that we get challenged. Where do I fall? What am I going to do? And I hope that's what is sinking deep into people. And that's why I try to write something so immersive, and I try to write a world that feels real and is immersive, so that it really can become part of the reader.
That's interesting when you say that, because the feeling, you talk about those feelings that you get, and you do certainly in Artifice, you feel things very deeply because of the way your style of writing it. It's like you're there, you feel it, and I like how you say that part stays with you. The facts could get, I don't want to say blurred, but the facts may fade, I think is the word you said.
Yeah, facts fade.
Still get the feeling.
Mm-hmm. It stays forever. I think it gets you. There's a deeper level there. I think there's a deeper level, with our emotions that, get into the soul and the spirit, and they really do become part of who we are. And that's what I want to engage in the right way.
And you do beautifully. You
Thank
do
you.
beautifully. When you said that, we're talking, and I love your emotion, by the way, and I love your sensitivity, and I see it, and that's I find that absolutely beautiful about you. So thank you, Sharon Cameron. It's like music, and I've looked into, because of my recent medical, some music therapy and stuff, and in discussions with some people, and but I get it even before that. The feeling you get when a certain old song, doesn't have to be an old song, but it's certain, and you're right there, and you're right there, and reading, and those, like you're saying, those feelings take you right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, my early years as a musician, I I would never tell people, go get a music degree to become a writer. This is probably not the path that I would say. That makes a lot of sense. But, actually, weirdly for me, it did make a lot of sense, because I find a lot of parallels in what I was doing before with what I'm doing now, because I realized all these years that I spent thinking of music, and even down onto a sentence level. I find parallels with with phrasing, and where you pause, and where you build, and where you take a breath. Even down on a sentence level, the rhythm of a sentence, I feel that so paralleled to the phrasing of music. And I realized that what I've been doing all of those years, honestly, was storytelling, and teaching storytelling, but just through a different medium. And, I very much find music as storytelling. It's just storytelling that is using sound to engage emotion. And I'm now using the sound of words, to engage that emotion. And so actually I found, again, a very natural progression, between the two, rather than a complete
Yeah.
shift
Yeah.
in my life. Yeah.
Still play?
A little bit, not as much as I should. I'm an awfully busy writer. And so
No, I did.
I
Yeah,
don't get as
easy
much
for me to say.
time, and
There
I
you
just,
go.
a little
Yeah.
bit I do. And I still love music, and I still do listen a lot for inspiration.
It's easy for me to say, well, you really should play. Yeah, as busy as you are, it's always easy to tell someone else what they, I always say, my line has been for years, people point the finger, but fear the mirror. They'll tell you what to do, or they'll tell you, but they never want to look at you. What about me? What am I playing? What am I doing? But that's beautiful. In this sort, with the young people, and again, I'm not going to get into recent events, but that to see that level of hate rise, and then to see how the heroics of some, and certainly not of others, going along to get along, ignoring, or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? Not for to. I'm trying to be very, I don't.
I try not to be frightened by it, actually, because I do see so many parallels between, the 1930s and what led to the rise of the acceptance of so much hate. Because that really is what it is, isn't it? You have to have a society accept a level of division and hatred. And I find that the fact that we as human beings have that ability, I find that quite scary, actually. Um, but what I take from this as well is that we have to engage our mind and we have to engage our emotions. And honestly, particularly with my book Bluebird, which is the book before this, was really about stepping back, taking a look at ourselves and thinking, what do I believe? And understanding that we have the ability to change what we have believed and what we have supported, and that we are not bound, by what we have believed before or for our past. I think we see the world right now, in the modern world, we see each other as so on this side or on that side. And we have the ability to look at ourselves and change sides. We have the ability to do that. We are not bound by what came before. And so I think what I want these books to do is, again, it's the challenge of the choice. But in order to challenge ourselves with a choice, we have to be able to look at ourselves. And I think a lot of what happened, particularly in Germany in the 1930s, is people bought a line and they bought a system, and they did not back up and look at what they really believed and what they believed was actually right. And so I hope these books are challenging people to do just that, and to think, ask the questions. Don't don't buy the line that you are hearing online or from the media or from a government or whatever it is, or from one person. You need to look at yourself and you need to ask yourself the question.
Yeah,
And
looking at
and
mirror.
that's what we have to do in order to make a choice. I
That's
hope
beautiful.
that's what I'm doing.
But that is so beautifully stated, and I know I should end with that because it was so beautiful. And I've kept you a long time, but I just love this, and we talked a little about the book. So get the book and read it, and possibly I can get Sharon Cameron to come back, if
Too.
you suffer my madness again, because it's
Of
so
course.
beautiful talking with you and having explained it, and again getting to know the author as you are, the human that you are, such a joy for me. As I said, looking at acknowledgments, looking at notes, there's things that are looking at your website, and
Mhm.
things that are telling, and the topics that you choose, and you're so open with it, and that's the message for today. I mean, not today, but for now. Now, I should say for today. Like tomorrow, there's going to be a different message. But I obsess about stuff. Sorry, but that's what we need to hear, to examine, because there is so much. I was going to mention earlier. These days, there was a time where newspapers had the op-ed, in the olden days, the opinions section, the editorials in a certain section. It was marked that. Now, so much of the news, and all of them, I'm going to say all of them, I'm not picking any particular ones. If there's a story, my audience knows this, if there's something that really interests me, I will get obsessive in tracking down where it came from. And so often I find things are incorrect.
Mhm.
Another line I've used for years is, the early news is rarely the accurate news. Not that they're not trying to be accurate, but everybody
Right.
wants to be first. Everybody,
Right. Right.
and it's, as we've seen recently, and I've seen all my life. So again, your message is so powerful to people and so timely. And having written this, you started writing this when? Or
This book, oh gosh, this book started,
oh,
the research maybe started 2021,
yeah,
and it got written, through 2022. really. So, these last three books have kind of spanned elections and pandemics and so much shift in our world. And maybe that's why I pull what I do out of them. But I also think maybe that's why this was the time for these pieces of historical fiction, which maybe sounds like a little bit, of a strange thing because I'm talking about the past. But again, it's not the past. It's about now. And I think that's why I hope that's why they need to be read right now. So people can pull what they need for them for our time. For our time. This is our
Beautiful said. There should be libraries should be doing groups about this, group discussions with kids, people in religious, everybody.
everyone.
Read it and discuss it and engage it. And the timing, I feel, not to be too esoteric, but when you started and look at now and it came out in November of, it is 2023. Yes, 2023. I have to remind myself sometimes. It's hard.
So I hope these books are starting discussion, because isn't that what we need right now? We need the ability to have a discussion. Nobody has every piece of every answer. We need to put them together. We need to put the ideas together. And that's where we're going to find the innovative, right? That's where it is. And so if these books foster people sitting down and discussing two different ideas, how could I have a higher calling for our time right now? Because that is so much what we need.
I agree. And people need to be active listeners. You can see it so often when people are just waiting to get their thoughts in. They're not actually listening. They're not taking in. Even at 70 years old, one of my favorite things is, wow, I never thought about it like that. I still like to have beliefs, whatever, challenged. And then either I'm more deeply into, I knew that, I felt that, now it affirms it, or I've got to look at this differently. I never looked at it from that aspect, and you do such a beautiful job with it. And
if I can do that while immersing a reader in a story that is, about art and heists and Amsterdam and people, where you're not quite sure who's good and who's bad, and an exciting story, a little bit of a thriller with beautiful words. If I can do all of that at the same time, well, I've got the best job in the world, don't I?
You do. And I just want to say, it's not if you do. It's not if you can. And again, I don't want to sound that like adversarial or anything, but I've got to say, from my perspective, people used to say years ago, you talk for a living. No, I read for a living. And you call this a living, and I've got all my jokes about that. But you do. And when you can be so impacted so powerfully by your writing. Yeah, you can read something that might be, almost hate to use the word. Well, I'm going to use the word. If you hate to use it, don't use it. I don't know. Dry. I've just got to, instead of me searching for it, you still learn something.
Yeah.
But you get, as we were talking about earlier, the feeling.
The fact versus feeling. That's right.
Feelings. Yeah, the feelings that you get. Just take a minute and talk about your website if you don't mind.
Yeah, you can find me at SharonCameronBooks.com. There's all kinds of little interesting things about me on there. There's some great links to interviews and to research. Actually, I think right now, I don't know when this will be out, but it'll be on there for a long time. There's a video of me reading the first chapter of Artifice. If you would like to hear a little bit of the first chapter, I'm on there doing that. And so lots of stuff to look at. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, I am grateful to you, and I love the fact that you made time to do the gig with me today, but more importantly, grateful to you and for you and for our world. You're incredible.
Thank you. And thank you for having me, and thank you for doing what you're doing, because you're giving a platform, aren't you? So you also have one of the greatest jobs. Thank you.
You're doing it. I'm very self-deprecating. Let me say thank you. Let me be respectful and say thank you. I hope we could do this again. Okay, I'm going to get emotional, so it's time for me to go. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, you can get more information. Right back at you. You can get more information